time coming. I appreciate the patience that you guys have showed and sticking with me and showing your interest. We did shoot a second episode. Dan Stevens, shout out. Thank you for taking your time to shoot that episode with me. We had a fascinating discussion about free speech and First Amendment issues, cancel culture, and all kinds of interesting topics surrounding all of that. And it was great, but unfortunately, I do not have the right equipment to make that happen, is what it boils down to. We had it all set up. I had my man Dan right here on the TV, and like I said, we had a great chat, but unfortunately, Dan's sound did not come through, and so we'll have to shelve that episode for now until we can touch up the sound or recreate it. I'm going to see if maybe I can get Dan here in the studio, in the den, in person, so stay tuned for that one. But in the meantime, I wanted to talk about something that's in the news right now that a lot of people are talking about, and that is the situation surrounding violence against Asian people, Asian Americans, but I'm going to end up stretching it out to Asians in general, and I'll explain why. But first, I want to talk about, obviously this is spurred by the recent shooting in Georgia, in which, unfortunately, very sadly, several people were shot and killed, and a lot of those people were Asian Americans. There's a lot of questions surrounding the shooter's motives. We don't exactly know what his motive was. Not that his motive, whatever it is, could ever justify what he did. Obviously, it cannot. But one of the theories, one of the things that's getting talked about a lot is this notion of the increase in violence against Asians and Asian Americans, specifically since the onset of the COVID pandemic. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that, a little bit about Joe Biden and his role in all of this. And specifically, I would like to start with a statement that he made regarding violence against Asians the other day. And he said, "Our silence is complicity. We cannot be complicit. We have to speak out. We have to act." So I'd like to take a few minutes and just explain why President Biden's words are, unfortunately, completely hollow. Now, before you jump to any conclusions, if you don't know me, this is not a pro-Trump statement. This is not a pro-Trump video. I am not pro-Trump, not by any stretch of the imagination. So I want to get that out there right away. However, that doesn't mean that I'm pro the other guy, the other side, the other person, the other side of the aisle, if you will. And the reasons for that, and especially when it comes to President Biden's words regarding violence against Asian people, has to do with Joe Biden's record when it comes to violence against Asian people. And I'd like to start with the fact that we are currently engaged in no less than 3 wars in Asia. We're still in Afghanistan as well as Iraq. And in Afghanistan, which we've been there, I believe, since 2003, so that's 18 years. And recently, it was in an article from today, actually. It's from a website I'm actually not familiar with called Responsible Statecraft. It looks pretty official. And I'm sure this information is available on several other outlets. And it says that the Biden administration is planning to keep U.S. forces in Afghanistan past an agreed upon May 1st deadline to withdraw, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee said Wednesday to a panel hosted by Foreign Policy. It's a general feeling that May 1st is too soon, just logistically, Representative Adam Smith, Democrat from Washington, claimed. Citing conversations with administration officials, you cannot pull out 10,000 plus troops in any sort of reasonable way in just 6 weeks. So, they're going to stay. We're going to stay in Afghanistan still. And the irony here is that they've been talking about this drawdown or this complete withdrawal for several years now, since Obama was president. And this May 1st deadline has been around for a bit. I forget off the top of my head exactly when that deal was struck under Trump, I believe. But so it's not as if they're saying, you know, it's just not reasonable to do in 6 weeks. Well, it's not as if you only had 6 weeks notice to prepare for this. But this is the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. Just uttering this just absolute bullshit. I don't know how else to put it. But it's pure, unadulterated bullshit. It is an excuse, a thin, tired one at that, to justify continued imperialism and continued flexing in the Middle East. So there's just that's just the Afghanistan war for starters. And of course we also have the Iraq war that we're still there, and there's no sign of pulling out there either. I saw an article, a headline from an article that unfortunately I was unable to scroll down and actually read the rest of it, and I was looking for the information elsewhere, and I couldn't find it. But clearly it's out there that Biden has made, or Biden administration officials, maybe not necessarily Biden himself, but his administration officials have said that they have no plans to withdraw troops from Iraq anytime soon either. And I believe we've been there since 2003, 2004. I think we invaded Afghanistan and Iraq within a 2-year period there, 18, 17 years ago. Still there. Thousands of American troops dead. Countless, hundreds of thousands of civilians, Iraqi, Afghani, have lost their lives from American bombs, and also from terrorist interest, whatever that means. But to be sure, you know, there was some violence committed from that side. So it seems, you know, the Taliban controls more territory now than it ever has before. That headline was just out there the other day. And so what gains have we made? And what purpose are we really serving? Whatever it is, it doesn't seem to be in line with what we're told it's supposed to be. And yet, we're going to keep doing it. So, that's 2 wars that we've had ongoing for almost 2 decades, that the current president, despite popular opinion and preference that we get out of those wars, has essentially gone on record saying that no, we're going to stay in those both of those wars. So that's bad news. And then we have the current war in Syria, which is just a complete debacle, an atrocity actually, is a more appropriate word. And I'd like to look at the gray zone here, which is one of my go-to sites. Aaron Mate, a great reporter, and this is from an article from actually back in September about Aaron Mate, the reporter, testifying to the UN Security Council about an OPCW cover-up in Syria to basically fabricate an attack, and that inspectors went in there and basically determined that no such attack occurred. Sorry, that's the OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. And what it says in this article, and you can read the testimony, and this has been covered in a few other outlets, although not in mainstream outlets, is that veteran OPCW inspectors who investigated an alleged chemical attack in Duama, I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right, Syria, in April 2018, say that their probe was censored and manipulated. Under direct U.S. government pressure, the OPCW concealed evidence that pointed to the incident being staged on the ground, and instead released a report that suggested Syrian government culpability. The allegation against Syria led to the bombing of Syria by the US, France, and the UK just days after the alleged incident. So, we know already that the Iraq War was completely based off faulty information, which, looking back, seems ludicrous to think that that was anything other than intentionally misleading in order to get us involved and start a war there. And there's various reasons for that. So we have 3 wars currently in Asia where innocent civilians are dying from American bombs. Asian people, not Asian Americans, but people who are Asian, whose relatives and families, no doubt some of them live here, who are Asian Americans, being killed by our weapons, our bombs, in illegal, unjustified wars. That's violence against Asian people. And to just drive it home a little bit more, when we talk about Joe Biden and his record of violence against Asian people, just took a look back at a Reuters article from 2016 in which the lead graph says, U.S. President Barack Obama's administration has offered Saudi Arabia more than $115 billion in weapons and other military equipment and training, the most of any U.S. administration in the 71-year U.S.-Saudi alliance, a report by Reuters has found. And of course, as I'm sure you're all well aware, Joe Biden was Barack Obama's vice president. He was very heavily involved in state policy, foreign policy. So you might say, well, okay, so they sold a bunch of weapons to Saudi Arabia. The problem with that is it's been well documented that Saudi Arabia has used those weapons to commit horrific genocide in its neighboring country of Yemen. And those are our weapons, our bombs, committing mass murder, a genocide. And so you can add Yemen to the list of Asian countries which are currently just in a complete state of horror and disarray due to directly due to U.S. foreign policy. Okay, so when Joe Biden talks about complicity and about how we need to act, he's right. But unfortunately, he's the one who's complicit, and we're the ones who need to act by stopping this destructive trend of putting our faith and our trust in people like him. And I think that's the whole reason why I do this, why I decided to do the Tiger Den, because there's a very obvious disconnect when it comes to these topics, and once you look at it closely enough, it becomes absurd. And yet, most people, many people I should say, are ignorant to the facts and how they fit together. And it's not because they're bad people or because they're stupid or any of that bullshit. Okay? The reason, I think, is because people are tired, they're worn down, they're stressed out in their day-to-day lives. We already know that Americans work harder than almost any other first world country. And we have the least amount of vacation time. We don't have health care. We're bombarded by 24/7 information news cycle, and we're stressed out. And there's a lot of stressful things going on in the world for us to fixate on if we allow ourselves to do that. And it can be overwhelming. So I don't blame the average person if they're not aware of these details. So I hope to share this kind of information with as many people as possible so that they understand that the story as it's given to you is not what's actually happening. And as you look more closely, you'll start to see that this is true no matter what subject you apply it to. It's not just Asia or Asian Americans or violence against Asian people. You can extrapolate this whole process out to virtually any governmental or foreign policy related topic. But to stay on topic, Joe Biden, as a result of the two recent mass shootings that we've had, and I'd like to give a shout out to my love, Allie, for sharing this article earlier from Forbes, actually, that talks about Joe Biden and his administration's support for warrantless seizures of firearms. And I'm not going to get into the details of Second Amendment and gun rights and gun violence and so forth in general, because that's another topic that we can chew on another time. But I would like to point out that President Joe Biden trying to deprive presumably law-abiding American citizens of their constitutional rights to own and maintain a firearm is absurd. And I think that's the word of the night for me, because for one, when it comes to arms dealing, the United States is far and away the world's biggest arms dealer. And when you consider the amount of violence that's spurred because of that, it's difficult to take his words seriously when he says that we need to do something about gun violence. And I think part of the disconnect for some people in being able to put all of this together is that the violence that Joe Biden is guilty of typically does not happen here in America, where we live and where we primarily concern ourselves with in terms of our day-to-day lives. But the reality is that just because it's happening thousands of miles away on the other side of the world, it doesn't mean it doesn't deserve your attention. It doesn't mean that it's not worth considering when you're taking stock of whether or not this person deserves your support, politically or otherwise. So, I'm going to leave it there for tonight, and I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and I'm happy to finally get some more material out there, and I hope to do some more episodes like this, some quick hitter types, before I can hopefully get what I need to start doing some interviews. I've got some great guests lined up, so please stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, stay safe out there and question everything, always. And I'll see you again soon in the Tiger Den.